President-elect Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General is facing new pressure this week from his accusers and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle. Matt Gaetz is at the center of several allegations involving drugs, bribes, and sex. Gaetz resigned last week ahead of the expected release of a House Ethics Committee report. Sources tell CBS News the committee is expected to meet on Wednesday, while lawmakers remain divided over its release.
We don't want to set a precedent where we, under any circumstances, will release documents from that committee.
I believe the Senate should have access to that. Now, should it be released to the public or not? That's I guess that will be part of the negotiations.
And the lawyer for two witnesses who testified before the House Ethics Committee is sharing his client's support for those details to be revealed. Major Garrett sat down with that lawyer earlier today for the CBS Evening News and joins me right now. Major, what did he have to tell you about those allegations?
The lawyer's name is Joel Leppard, and he represents two of, he told us, was 11 witnesses who have testified before the House Ethics Committee. And he said that the two clients that he represented attended many parties, 10 to 15, in which Matt Gaetz was present, and their presence there, that is to say his two clients, was with the understanding that they would be paid to have sex with guests at these various parties. Among those, Matt Gaetz. Here's also part of what he told us.
She arrived at the party. She had sex with Representative Gaetz within minutes of her arrival. Later on, when she was walking out to the pool area, she observed to her right Representative Gaetz having sex with her friend, who was 17 at the time.
And on this question, she's absolutely sure.
She's absolutely certain that she observed, seeing her friend and Representative Gaetz having sex against what she described as a game table of some sort.
If the House Ethics Committee report were to be made public, what do you think it would reveal?
My clients want to know that this happened and it's real. They didn't vote in the last two elections. They don't care one way or another, but they do want the public to know that they're not lying. They did not come forward willingly. They've never spoken to anyone without the force of a legal subpoena. The testimonies of her and the other 11 individuals that testified would show that this actually did happen, and the American people would know, and they could decide if that's the person they want to be the next Attorney General of the United States.
Joel Leppard also told us that there are lots of text messages in the possession of the House Ethics Committee between Matt Gaetz and his two clients and others, and that the Ethics Committee is in possession of Venmo and PayPal receipts showing that Matt Gaetz and others working in his behalf paid for sex at these parties. Also, there is coded language, Joel Leppard, the lawyer of these two witnesses, told us, that Gaetz used in text messages referring to illegal drugs that would be at these parties, and Matt Gaetz's ongoing curiosity to make sure that those illegal drugs, he would use code names, would be there at these various parties. So quite a bit of ground covered with this attorney representing two of, he told us, 11 witnesses that have appeared before the Ethics Committee.
And so, Major, presumably a lot more of those kinds of details would be spelled out in this report that, as of now, will not be released. House Speaker Mike Johnson had this to say about why on CNN over the weekend.
What I have said with regard to the report is that it should not come out. And why? Because Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress. He is no longer a member. There's a very important protocol and tradition and rule that we maintain that the House Ethics Committee's jurisdiction does not extend to non-members of Congress. I think that would be a Pandora's box.
Does Joel Leppard coming forward to put pressure on the House Ethics Committee to release the report do anything?
Well, he certainly hopes it will frame part of the conversation about what the public should or shouldn't know as the Senate decides whether or not to confirm Matt Gaetz as Attorney General. He doesn't believe that it's necessarily going to be the one thing that's going to influence the Ethics Committee decisively, but he said on behalf of his clients, he hopes the report is released because, based on his experience working with these two clients, being with them as they testified before the Ethics Committee and seeing the granularity, the detailed level of the committee's questions and the evidence that they had, that is to say the Ethics Committee, he believes it would be a comprehensive report that would shed a considerable amount of light on questions raised about Matt Gaetz's fitness for Attorney General, both ethical questions and legal questions.
Well, Major, we might have some answers when that House panel meets on Wednesday. Thank you so much for all that reporting. We should also point out that the Department of Justice investigated Matt Gaetz on these accusations and ultimately decided not to charge him.